You really realize how special it is the more you get to know about it.
High tides raise all boats.
That was the mindset, is if you wanted success, you left Pueblo, versus trying to build success within this community.
Over the years, I've just kind of fallen more and more in love with Pueblo.
But growing up, you always hear the negativity.
There's a lot of good stuff going on the east side.
I've been seeing a change where people are seeing more potential in Pueblo than they've ever realized before. I heard a lot of negativity in K-12. That was always the push, was go to college, leave your town, go to college, leave your community, go to college, leave your community.
It depends on who you hang around with. You may not always get to get the full picture of Pueblo. My name is James Bartolo. I am the co-founder of Our Pueblo along with my brother, and I have a background in journalism. So. I'm Dante, co-founder of Our Pueblo. I also do some work at my dad's office out here in Pueblo County. He sells paper products, janitorial supplies, stuff like that. And then I'm also a student at CSUP right now. I'm a sophomore, so I'm working in the Healy Center there in the business school.
I'm Jayson Falsetto. I am the Career and Technical Education Outreach Coordinator at Pueblo Community College. I'm involved in the community in multiple areas, but I'm proud to be a sixth-generation Puebloan.
Awesome. So then, since you guys have been so involved in the community, let's begin by talking about what your attitudes are about Pueblo and the people around you.
Yeah, so I've been in Pueblo since I was 4 years old. I was born in Fort Collins, but my family's from Pueblo. We came back here. And over the years, I've just kind of fallen more and more in love with Pueblo. I've done some professional reporting in Pueblo, and through it, I've gotten to meet a lot of the community leaders. And the history has always fascinated me. So my attitude's nothing but positive. Yeah, I'd say it's pretty similar for me too. As you grow up in Pueblo, you get to learn a little bit more about the city and about the community, about the people, and you really realize how special it is the more you get to know about it, because you don't always get to know about everything, and we are a pretty word of mouth town, so you don't always, it depends on who you hang around with. You may not always get to get the full picture of Pueblo, but we really have a lot of great people here and a lot of special things.
That is excellent. I would echo your words as well. My passion for Pueblo continues to grow as I get older. I think all of us are starting to feel that. And I have a feeling of hope in our community. I know that sounds kind of cliche, but growing up, you always hear the negativity. And even with some coworkers, you hear the negativity from multiple aspects in the last 4 or 5 years. But I've been seeing a change where people are seeing more potential in Pueblo than they've ever realized before, and their passion is coming back into the community.
Yeah, so that brings a really good point, because, the Bartolos, you guys really talked about the positive stuff. And Jayson, I've had kind of like the similar experience where I think the people around me didn't view Pueblo in a positive light. And I wonder, the Bartolos, do you notice a certain demographic, certain groups or communities that are more positive or negative? And what does that look like?
I don't know if the demographic is necessarily divided by age. From what I've seen in myself, and not only with other people, I think my generation particularly, we may not have had that positive view on Pueblo growing up as young kids, but I think as we matured into young adults, we've gotten more optimistic about it for whatever reason that may be. Specific demographics, though, I'm not sure. It's kind of a mixed bag, because the people that have stayed here seem to like it, so yeah. If people that don't like it just left, and you don't really hear from them much.
So then, how about you, Jayson? You've obviously been through a little bit. Me and Dante's not graduated. I'm in a middle area, and James recently graduated. But for you, Jayson, you've been through, you've been in school, you've grown up here, you've now graduated, entered a community. So have you noticed any trends of like where people are more positive, where people are more negative, and like where maybe, like, for example, as James said, some people have, or I think Dante actually said this, some people have access to information that others don't. Where do you see the positivity and where do you see the negativity?
I see it. I would agree that it's a mix. I heard a lot of negativity in K-12. That was always the push, was go to college, leave your town, go to college, leave your community, go to college, leave your community. And then with Pueblo having the economic decline that it has been known for almost 50 years, I would say maybe 40 years at this point, that was the mindset, is if you wanted success, you left Pueblo versus trying to build success within this community. So it was all the way up to my junior year of high school that I was told by a lot of people to leave Pueblo and a lot of people to stay in Pueblo. And I did almost leave, but I had a rare opportunity to go to CSU Pueblo, and I actually earned the Kane Scholarship. And I took that opportunity, and I'm beyond thankful for that, because the people at CSU Pueblo pushed me to see what the community does offer. And then you started working in the community. I was really not connected to a lot of community stakeholders when I was growing up, and connecting with Rotary and then even Kiwanis, other organizations through the community, other museums and such, and the Historic Preservation Commission. There's so much untapped potential in Pueblo, and there's so much potential that is just about to be tapped into that we are just seeing now. And that is what's really changed my opinion personally. But I'm hoping that we can start showing more students in the K-12 region how many opportunities there actually are in Pueblo.
And that's oh, my bad. Go ahead, Dante.
Sorry, I was just going to pop in and say one more thing. I really think that it's also important to recognize that I've had a lot of privilege, and I've been very fortunate throughout my life in this community, and recognize that, you know, other people have more, have struggled more economically than I have, just because of what I've been born into. So I think it's important to also recognize that, and that there's people feeling the effects of the economic downturn harder than I have. So.
I strongly agree with that as well. I have to reflect that I did grow up in a privileged background, and being able to understand that not everyone's had those opportunities, we need to try to realize that more.
Yeah, and I think that's where really the similarities between this group come really close together, because we all go into CSU Pueblo, or have in the past, and I would have to agree that definitely I came from that same background. So then it comes down to, I guess one of the questions I'm going to jump to, it was going to be later in the series, but it's what is on the horizon and how is that being leveraged for every part of the community rather than just people like us. So I know since you guys are all really connected, you guys might know of some things on the horizon that might be like a resource to other people or an asset to other people. Can you guys let us in on that, if you know any?
I have a few areas that we've been looking into the city, and of course sustainable and economic housing is something that is becoming more difficult everywhere in the country, and in Pueblo it is for sure. Finding an apartment to rent for under $1,000 a month is almost impossible now in Pueblo, and it doesn't even really matter what side of town or where the location is of that apartment. So I know that working with a few people in the city and a few different commissions, we're trying to find alternatives. One of my plans with the Historic Preservation Commission is to see what we can do to have more downtown living. And there are between 8,000 and 10,000 apartment units downtown that are likely not being used right now for that purpose. And for a multitude of reasons, whether it is by code or by the owner not wanting to use those spaces, we're trying to find a way that we can make that more available and maybe rehab a lot of those areas to allow economic housing within the community and downtown Pueblo.
Yeah, so two people come to mind in particular with the work they've done. Actually, and this is just in one neighborhood. There's a lot of good stuff going on the east side. First person that comes to mind is Tom Kerrigan with EAST, with the mobile food banks he has. And just kind of ever since the east side lost their grocery store recently, it's been really important to that community to, you know, have fresh foods out, you know, fruits and veggies out, healthy foods, and have something more than the gas station convenience store food. It's considered what they call a food desert. And And the other person that comes to mind is also Javier Quinones, with what he's done on the east side as well. He's held a lot of social events, brought a lot of young people together, and I think that's really important to build that community, because I think even though times may be rough, I think if you have that community and you have people you can depend on, it makes things a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. And Mia, you and I talked about this over text about the collaborative nature of Pueblo. I think that's something that we have here that not a lot of other towns have. And I got the opportunity to be a part of the Pueblo BERT team, the Business Economic Recovery team, through working in the Healy Center at CHP, and being able to meet all these people that really care about Pueblo and really want to see Pueblo thrive. Some people I was able to meet more in depth. Some people I was meeting for the first time, but those Zoom calls have kind of been, they've really increased my confidence in Pueblo, and just it's shown me that, we do have a collaborative nature here, and we're willing to work together and really see Pueblo thrive, even when we're, hit hard with COVID and everything. So that's something that I look at as something that's going to be really positive right now and in the future for Pueblo.
And this is a beautiful segue even into what you guys are doing. So we didn't really get to dive into what your business is and what you're building. And I feel like that is definitely a resource that is helping both economically, but also for like every level of business owner and entrepreneur. So if you can kind of touch on what it is that you do, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so our business is called Our Pueblo. We started it back in August of 2020, and basically James and I we're offering affordable marketing services, just trying to get the word out about whatever business or organization you are in Pueblo, and how you're contributing to Pueblo. Really just showcasing what our hometown has to offer. So we're doing like social media, we're doing a newsletter that's, and then highlighting a business of the month each month, where we kind of just dive deeper. James writes an article about them and really just kind of tell stories about what Pueblo is, and reminding people, Pueblo is really special and we have a lot here. We just don't always get to hear about it. So that's one of the things we're trying to do different is, there's always multiple news sources and social media pages, and it seems like news is so easily available, but it's coming from all different directions and things say different, have different opinions about everything. So you don't know what's what. So we're trying to have just one location where people can go and learn, how can I shop locally for this? If I want to go to this restaurant, when can I go? What are the hours for it? Or, I need to get a Christmas gift for my friend, but they're kind of hard to shop for. Where can I go for that? So really connecting that local consumer to a local business.
I dig that. And it's actually really interesting too, because you start realizing, just kind of going back to what's on the horizon for Pueblo, there's a lot of moving parts that all have to do kind of with increasing exposure. So we have what you're doing. We obviously have Wake Up Pueblo, but then there's also, what they're doing, Water Tower Place. I think there's a couple news sources that are trying to be built through there. But then there's also on top of that, there's Zerker, there's Nikki, there's, I think his name is Cricket. There's a bunch of videographers in town, writers, and I think that there's been a lot of agency that's been taken into individuals' hands outside of even like well-established places, right? So like you moved from the Chieftain, and you decided, well, like I may not have the Chieftain, but you still have the opportunity to still write for the betterment of Pueblo all at the same time. So I think it's really cool to see how many things are being tied together all at once. And even though in a way it's like, it was kind of interesting because me and Dante, had a conversation at the very beginning, and it was kind of weird because it's like, are we competitors? You don't know. But at the same time, it's like, it doesn't matter because, our competition is all for the sake of like high tides raise all boats. You know what I mean? So whatever you do helps, and whatever we do helps. So it's like, whoever wins. It doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of like whether or not Pueblo wins. And so Jayson, in terms of what PCC has been doing, PCC is again, one of those things that like growing up, especially in Pueblo, people are like, oh, do you really want to go to PCC? The same way they say CC Pueblo. Do you really want to go to CC Pueblo? So how is PCC kind of like changing the landscapes of Pueblo? What does that look like?
So I think that we, along with CSU Pueblo, our goal is to try to help educate as many community citizens as possible in Southern Colorado, especially Pueblo. And our goal is we want to be a college for anybody to come attend, whether that is they're changing their career path or they came from a very rough childhood and they're starting over, their first generation, all the way to some people in manufacturing coming back just to upskill. We're trying to make it as affordable as possible. We're trying to make it as accessible as possible. And we're trying to remove as many barriers as possible. And I know CSU Pueblo is trying to do the same thing as well. We don't want education to be a privileged item in our society, and especially in Pueblo. And so many community members are not given that opportunity that we're trying to break those barriers. It's difficult. Changing an area like that at such a large scale can be very difficult, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take years for all of us to do it. But again, we're trying our best to help as many people in our community as possible and be realistic as to what they need.
I agree. And it's actually, that brings up another really interesting point that I've always found. I mean, just the way Dante said that Pueblo is very collaborative. And I kind of view it as like when I went to Hawaii once, they explained that the forest there's actually not like a whole lot of predator-prey relationships. It's mostly everything works in unison. And the interesting thing to me is that even though PCC and CSU Pueblo are both very affordable options, they're complementary, not competitive, right? So it's like we feed through PCC into CSU Pueblo and like vice versa, you know, like CSU Pueblo offers certain services to PCC. And I think that's just a beautiful thing about, like that kind of dynamic doesn't come just because a university decides to do that. It comes from people who decide to build a university like that. And I know President Monte has been trying, wonders, definitely build a university that's also for the people. So then going into, like, we've definitely hit a lot of beautiful, positive things. But I guess what I want to start moving into is, what are maybe some obstacles that you might have come across being from Pueblo? And are there any issues that maybe we should start focusing on, like collectively, and like recognizing in a constructive way that this is a problem that we need to fix?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, the problem with food scarcity, but I do see a lot of people coming to help with that. Also the Pueblo Food Project, and I mean, food banks seem to be popping up left and right. As far as problems specific to Pueblo, I'm not too sure, but as kind of there's global problems that affect Pueblo ultimately. We're in a pandemic right now. The economy's obviously not great, and we're going to be, this younger generation are going to be a big instrumental part in fixing it. So I think the way to navigate through that is, like you said earlier, be more of a collaborative community and a collaborative economy, to kind of bring up the community as a whole, as opposed to, trying to compete and leave others in the dust. Because I do think we ultimately, there's a lot of communications people out here. So there's a lot of people with similar backgrounds to me. A lot of people my age that I've been fortunate to work with throughout college. And I think building those connections is very important.
Yeah, definitely. And, talking about what James said about kind of rebuilding, fixing, with technology, Zoom, Google Meets, whatever, and doing a lot of stuff online now, I think that our generation is kind of going to be really working hard and finding new ways and pivoting and shifting a lot. In Pueblo, I think there's a lot of resources that I learned about this year that I didn't even know existed in Pueblo. So getting the word out about those resources, making them a little bit more readily available, and then at the same time creating your own opportunities. Looking for problems and then going and trying to solve them and working together by collaborating.
So I think that there's two major aspects of Pueblo that can sometimes hurt us just by how we are. And that can be the balance of collaborating versus competition. Sometimes, I mean, it's great that there's more people creating images for Pueblo, positive images. It's great that we have 2 large educational institutions here that are doing their best. But sometimes there could be a little bit of a battle between certain places. And that could be through anyone from a small business to K-12 to higher education possibly. So trying to, instead of competing with each other, trying to take resources from each other, it's often more beneficial to try to work together, and that's where the collaboration comes in. That Pueblo, I think we're doing better, but we have room for improvement. We can definitely collaborate more as a community with each other. Connecting resources to work in a stronger pack is usually better, and I think that a lot more people are realizing that with the community, and we're starting to see that uptick, but it's a work in progress. And I would say that this is more of an overarching problem, that not a problem, but something for us to eventually move forward with, is an identity crisis. I think that for almost 40 years, Pueblo was always known as the Steel City. That is really what boosted our community. And that is a great name and a great understanding that we are the steel city of the West. We have become very successful because of that. But when the steel industry crashed, we really didn't have another identity. We then became known as a Rust Belt city, just like many others. But when all of our neighbors have been able to really adapt and innovate and diversify, we've not diversified as much as we should have and that we can. So I think that's definitely what's holding Pueblo back. And this is where it can get a little more controversial, but sometimes there can be the old guard that has known Pueblo for 70 plus years, that they don't want massive change like that because it can change the dynamics and status quo of certain parts of Pueblo. But at the same point, more people will benefit from those changes than would not.
Dude, I'm happy you said it. So like one of the things that has always actually kind of bugged me a little bit was like the Steel City narrative, because not necessarily that like it's beautiful to love your history, right? But I also think that it's interesting because I created this initially thinking about the idea of brain drain, and is that true? You know what I mean? And I got some pushback. I was like, no, that's a myth, and you're spreading a dangerous myth, which I can understand. But then the idea is still like, you still reduce it, you know, whether it's a natural phenomenon or whether or not it's in higher rates or not, it's still an idea of how can you make a city that really like younger generations can say this is home. Like this feels like it defines me. And I think that Steel City and even some like the old school traditions was something that older generations can really say, this defines me, this feels like home. And I don't necessarily know that, recent graduates or soon to be college kids really feel like, yeah, I'm a Steel City diehard, you know what I mean? But also when it comes down to, well, you guys brought both this idea of collaboration. And I think that there's 2 ways to kind of view collaboration. So one being there's definitely times and places for collaboration, but where I think sometimes I've struggled is that we also don't welcome competition. And there's a way to welcome competition in a way that you don't necessarily have to collaborate, you don't necessarily have to join forces, because that's the same way you build monopolies. And so sometimes like when you collaborate too much, it's like the ideas almost have to be uniform, which is why when you have a single entity, the efforts are all somewhat the same, and maybe that's the problem, right? Maybe that's the problem of traditionalism, because everything is going towards the same direction, the same goal, whereas if you did have competition, you have 2 people trying to achieve the same goal but differently. I think that the collaboration means that we become a little bit too uniform in the way we think and the way we try to change things. But either way, I definitely agree that the same component of viewing your neighbor as your neighbor and welcoming and supporting their success, you know what I mean? So for example, even if me and Dante are moving in different directions and we obviously have like different ways of achieving that, either way, I support him and I think he supports me, you know what I mean? And either way, that's to me like a version of collaboration, but while welcoming that competition. And then the other piece is actually something that we've touched on that a commenter, or it's a viewer also mentioned after watching it, was that it has to do with how our schools, like our educators K through 12, talk about Pueblo. So it's like some of that is, through your peers, your other students that say, I hate Pueblo. But then it's also clearly we've had the same experiences where maybe our teachers are like, do you really want to go to CC Pueblo? Do you really want to go to PCC? And that's something that our educators almost need to have a reform in, or think about, even talk about. Like maybe there's a good reason to leave, which there are definitely very many reasons to leave and come back, or leave and stay leave. You know what I mean? But either way, I definitely think that's an interesting conversation to have. And one other thing, I don't know if you guys have any insight on this, because we're all kind of in the communications education area, but someone commented and said that they don't have any STEM opportunities. Do you guys know if that, like, how do you feel about that? Because I'm going to talk about that in the next episode with someone else, but how do you guys feel about the STEM opportunities in Pueblo?
I think that's a genuine concern, the lack of STEM opportunities. Pueblo for a while has always been kind of an artsy town. There's been a real emphasis on the arts without much emphasis on STEM. I would like to see more, I'm not a STEM-oriented person, but I would like to see more STEM-oriented minds, specifically working towards solutions that are more environmentally sustainable. I think that's something that I'm passionate about, but I do not know much about and would like to collaborate and learn more about. But yeah, I think that is a genuine concern, and I'm not the best person to offer a solution for that, but I do think Pueblo as a whole needs to be more aware that there's been such an emphasis on the arts for so long and not enough on STEM. So I think that is a genuine concern.
Yes, so my degree's in civil engineering, so I come from a STEM background, and unlike the rest of my peers, they thought I was crazy for not wanting to go into a high-end job in Denver making six figures. They thought, why are you going to go work at a community college? Just that same mindset of just a community college. It's not. It's the same type of institution, just at a community level. But I digress. But with STEM, Pueblo really does lack. There are some STEM opportunities, such as engineering and some of the higher level with education, but they're far and few in between, and they're very difficult for the average Puebloan or the average person to get into in general. My emphasis lately has been more on advanced manufacturing. That's where my job takes me the most, and that would be the closest I could think to large STEM, other than maybe the health fields here. But again, we're trying just to expand manufacturing, but there is a lot more to it. So I do think that there are a lot more opportunities that need to be brought to Pueblo in terms of STEM. And again, like you said, the arts are fantastic, and we've definitely had a larger emphasis on the arts in Pueblo the last 20 or so years. But we need to make sure that we also balance all aspects of education in general, including STEM.
So then, Jayson, is there anything in the horizon for STEM that you might know of from PCC, or are we getting there?
We're trying. We're continuously trying to grow and adapt. I think definitely with the pandemic, a lot of manufacturers in town are struggling. I was in contact with multiple manufacturers. We were trying to build some relationships so they could have their employees come through, upskill with us, and try to build a larger middle class in Pueblo. That's kind of the overarching goal of that. But at the moment, most manufacturers are just trying to keep their doors open because of the pandemic. And so our connections are slim right now. I've not really talked to anybody for several months now. But there's a lot more potential there. I think the horizon has slowed because of the pandemic, but we're trying.
Gotcha. So then we're pretty much coming to a pretty good close. The last thing that I wanted to touch on is something that you were really excited, Jayson, is how's your perspective changed over the years? And, what were the triggers?
Absolutely. So I had family that left Pueblo, moved to Denver, moved to the East Coast, the West Coast, everywhere in between. And some of them they've all been successful, but some of them have been massively successful, and that's great. But what came to my mind, and it was in 2014 that I said, okay, I'll go to CSU Pueblo, I'll see how it is. And then I joined a few different programs there, including the President's Leadership Program. And that definitely helped change my perspective of how much there can be in Pueblo. But I was frustrated. I think that's a good word for it, is frustrated at how many people talk poorly of Pueblo and leave, and then they may come back, they may retire here, or they may come back in 5 years, and then they just stay quiet, and they found their path in Pueblo. They found that they liked it here. They won't admit they love it, but a lot of them will say they like coming back to Pueblo. So rather than continuously sending everyone out of Pueblo and then hoping they come back at retirement age or in 10 or 15 years, why don't we have that energy and that passion happening within Pueblo itself? Why that was something that I decided on, is that I wanted to stay in Pueblo and not come back and say, look at me, I came back from Denver, I came back from another large city. No, let's develop something here. Let's innovate, let's adapt our image, let's bring more businesses to Pueblo. We shouldn't be known as a town where people have to leave to find jobs and go make a living just to retire back here. Let's become a town that you can live a full life in. And so that is what's really changed my perspective and want to be here forever. I have no plans to leave Pueblo.
You just gave me a very good video idea. I could do a whole series on people who return, to the returners. No, that sounds stupid. Something like that. I'll credit Jayson Falsetto. But so this is actually going to be a whole flip back. But I was starting to think about how you said that housing and apartments have actually increased. And that's so funny because for the longest time I had the impression that the cost of living in Pueblo was actually one of the lowest in the country. Is that no longer true?
It still pretty much is, but everything is continuing to go up. And so I look at homes for sale in Pueblo all the time. That was another passion of mine. I love architecture, love engineering, all of that. But it's amazing to see how the vast majority of homes now are over $200,000. For a 1 or 2 bedroom house with 1 bathroom, maybe 1.5 baths, no garage or 1-car garage. So just to see that as a first-time home buyer, it's nearly impossible for anybody to buy a house if they make less than $50,000 or $60,000 a year. That's definitely becoming a problem in Pueblo. It definitely is a lot larger of a problem up in Springs and Denver and larger communities around the nation, but we're feeling it too. Prices continue to skyrocket here, unfortunately.
That makes sense. Well, you guys have been amazing. I'm super excited about this one going out. Do you guys have anything else to add that you'd want maybe to open dialogue about, or just kind of reassure people about before we close?
There's a lot of potential in Pueblo, and I really believe that if we keep pushing, we will get to become a very successful community for everyone.
I agree. Well, if that's the case, you know how to tell them how to find you guys, the Bartolos.
Yeah, so we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Our Pueblo, O-U-R and then Pueblo. And then you can find us on our website at www.ourpueblobusinesses.com. And we try to feature businesses on all of our platforms, and that's our main thing, is really getting the word out about organizations. So, if you need to get the word out about what you're doing and what you're offering to Pueblo, we'd be happy to help.
We're also the ones that make those little Pueblo facts. I know those have gotten increasingly popular. So that's probably how a lot of people know us. If you haven't heard the name before, you've probably seen the facts with the green and white background. So
they're fantastic.
Yeah, he's the mastermind behind them. He loves doing and finding history about Pueblo. It's pretty cool what he can find.
Very nice.
That's awesome. And then Jayson, I don't know if I want to put out first that we don't have any affiliation with PCC or sponsorship from PCC, but I'm really thankful that Jayson from PCC could come on. Is there anything that you want to say about that?
Yes, so if you do have any educational needs and you're looking into maybe manufacturing or upskill, you can definitely search PCC, Pueblo CC even, and then if you go to Advanced Manufacturing, you'll find my contact information on that landing page. You'll find me on social media as Jay Falsetto, Jay Falsetto, and if you send me a message and you want to get involved in the community or you have questions, I'm always here to help out.
I gotta start moving my cursor away from the mic. Anyhow, thank you guys so much, and tune in for the next episode of Next Gen when we're gonna start talking about STEM a little bit, since that's not my forte. But yes, thanks everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mia. Thanks for setting this up.
Thank you so much, Mia. It was a pleasure.